Hi, Rabbi Kirsch.
Hello.
Hello.
How are you?
Very well. Thank you. Thank you, Baruch Hashem. And yourself?
Very well, thank you.
Good.
I was at Shmuel's on Saturday night. He had a little bringing for his birthday a little bit, and I got to. So I saw Ramosha Wolf there, and several other people. But it was nice to see him.
Very nice. Very nice.
I was schmoozing with Mordechai Becher on Sunday, which I'm thinking was yesterday. Pretty sure it was. He thinks that there aren't important seminal works in Yiddish, scholarly. I mean, there are important, but I mean, like the Rambam and Rav Sadia Gaon and Rav Yehuda Halevi, they wrote in Arabic, and those are considered very important works, foundational, very important works. So you have foundational important works written in Arabic. You have obviously the Gemara written in Aramaic. You even have books of Navi written in Aramaic. But you even have this one I have to think about. You have Yaakov Me'am Loes written in Ladino. You do have Tsena or Ena written in Yiddish, but it's not considered an important work of scholarship. I don't know if Yaakov Me'am Loes is either. I think it is. I think you have to say Yaakov Me'am Loes is scholarship. I couldn't think of one in Yiddish that is something like those other works. And the question is, why not? Because in yeshiva, at least for the last couple hundred years, the lectures are being given in Yiddish. So that means that great scholarship is happening in Yiddish. So why aren't there important works that are written in Yiddish? There are what some people will, it seems like, consider important works written in English. But for some reason, there aren't in Yiddish.
Did Rabbi Becker have a?
Yeah, he had a. I mean, he was saying it might be because, let's say, when you have the Rambam and Rav Sadia Gaon and Rav Yehuda Halevi, there is a broader culture of scholarship that the Jews are involved in. In other words, it's not just a culture of scholarship of Jews, but there's a broader intelligentsia that Jews are interacting with. So let's say Rav Sadia Gaon, when he writes his work, it's going to be written by Jew and non-Jew. It's going to be read by Jew and non-Jew eventually, or at least the Jews that are going to be reading it are themselves people who engage in some kind of broader culture. The language is a language that's being shared by a broad range of people outside of just the limited culture of the Jews. So since that was a kind of language of the cultured and the language of literature and the cultured, so it makes sense that some important Jewish works would end up being written in those languages. But Yiddish isn't really a language like that. No, either is Ladino, I'm thinking of. But he's saying Yiddish was a language just for Jews. It wasn't a language that Jews used with others. It's not a shared language of other cultures. It's just Jews. So it's not the same thing as French or German, even German. Let's say Rav Shimshon Hirsch is writing in German. So it's not the same thing as Rav Shimshon Hirsch writing in German, because German is a language that's used by Jew and non-Jews alike. And many Jews might be more comfortable speaking German than they do speaking Hebrew. So if he wants to communicate with those Jews, he speaks in the language of, the broader culture.
And
Yiddish,
English for sure. Right?
And English is for sure that.
Yeah.
And so, but the thing is, so he's just theorizing. He's not saying, this isn't the answer to it, he's just theorizing. That might be it. But you do have Yaakov Me'amlois in Ladino. And that would be just like Yiddish. That would be as limited as Yiddish, but maybe it might be an exception to it. Anyways, we were talking, it was just something we were schmoozing about. Okay.
Rabbi, I'm wondering,
Yeah.
Ladino, I don't know if this is the same as Yiddish, but are there the different countries use a little bit different Yiddish? Maybe.
Right.
I'm just, wondering, the Polish Yiddish is, maybe that's, I don't know.
They're saying that Yiddish is even more limited, you're saying?
I'm not sure. No, I don't know. It's just a thought.
What about in contemporary? What about Hasidic scholarship? Do they write in?
Right, but you might have like schmoozin. You might have like a mimer, because let's say Lubavitcher Rebbe spoke in Yiddish. When he gave his Verbrengens, he's speaking in Yiddish, but when they print it, they don't print it in the original Yiddish. They print it in, as far as I know, they print it in Hebrew. Also, right. The Rebbes, like the Sfas Emes, and these were I think that the Sfas Emes, a lot of them were things that he was giving, like at Shalosh Shudas and Shav. I'm sure he said them in Yiddish originally, right. but they're being when they actually print the Sefer, they print it in Hebrew. I'm assuming it's the same thing with like Likutei Sichos, when Lubavitcher Rebbe was giving those that eventually are printed in Hebrew. But when he's giving them, I'm assuming he's giving them in Yiddish.
Oh yeah.
No, he did give them in Yiddish.
Right. So, but they don't. For some reason, they don't print them in Yiddish. And so, yeah, that even adds to it, like especially the Chassidish Sfarim, where they note where we can, the entire Chassidish movement, the early Chassidish movement, is probably happening in Yiddish, but for some reason they make a conscious choice to write all the Sfarim in Hebrew. Obviously there are phrases, even within Chabad, there are phrases that the Rebbe said in Yiddish, and they're phrases that are passed down in Yiddish and then translated. So the person will say, the Rebbe used to say, and then they'll say it in Yiddish, and then they'll translate it. But it's passed down in Yiddish. The Yiddish matters. It was how it was originally said. You'd think I don't know why, you'd think there'd be more of that. Okay, so last time we were talking about the mitzvah to build the Beis HaMikdash. The Rambam said that the mitzvah to build the Beis HaMikdash is one mitzvah, even though there are many components, even something like the menorah, let's say. or there this it certainly is a separate vessel, and it has all sorts of rules, and it's the building of it's discussed in the Torah, but those are more like details of a larger general mitzvah. That's how he's so when you build a menorah, when you make a menorah, you're fulfilling a mitzvah, but it's not a separate mitzvah from the mitzvah of building the Beis Hamikdash. So last time we talked about the mitzvah of building the Beis Hamikdash, and just for a moment or two, we were talking about attitudes within the various communities towards at least starting up sacrifice again, and David was sort of characterizing what he experienced from the Hasidic community. They didn't seem to be feeling like they're on the cusp of about to do korbanos again, or that they nor do they seem to be agitating for doing korbanos now. And maybe, I don't know, we were just suggesting together that maybe that's because they are expecting the Beis Hamikdash to come about miraculously, not through just a couple people getting together to do something like that. So it wouldn't be like Hanukkah, for instance, which obviously there's a miracle involved, but the initial skirmishes, etc., and maybe even the retaking of the Beit Hamikdash and restarting of the offerings, it might have seemed rather mundane. Obviously, they would have been heady, very inspirational times, but it might have seemed rather mundane. It's not like something is coming down from the heavens. If you're expecting it to be like that, so then it could be something that even happens out of relatively natural circumstances, out of the political situation that we're in now. But if you're expecting something to be absolutely miraculous, like a Beis Hamikdash, a fiery Beis Hamikdash coming down from the sky, or something like that, so you're not looking at events of today and thinking, well, somebody next week we could hear that somebody already did a korban on the Beis Hamikdash. You wouldn't expect that from there. So this thing of the mitzvah to build the Beis Hamikdash, it may not seem so. You might believe it's imminent, but you'd believe that something like Mashiach is going to come. Then when Mashiach comes, he's going to give us instructions of what to do, or something miraculous is going to happen then. But until Mashiach comes, it's not something we should be busying ourselves with, because it's not happening till Mashiach comes. And Mashiach coming will already be quite dramatic. All right, so the next mitzvah, mitzvah 21, that is that he commanded us to fear this temple very much, to the extent that we place a burden of fear and awe upon ourselves, and that this be from the fear of the temple. So what we might call Mora Mikdash, the awe or fear of the temple. Now he uses the word fear here. Some people might want to use the word awe, except that he says in Hebrew, again, I don't know what the original Arabic is, but in the Hebrew, they have it as pachad v'hayira. Pachad is fear, it's not awe. Yira can sometimes be translated as awe, but pachad is fear. So you are mixing fear and awe. So if you're speaking to the architect of, let's say, a synagogue, there are different ways to go when it comes to designing the structure of a synagogue. There are some people who like the idea of a kind of Hamish community, where you walk in and you right away feel at home, and the kind of shared spirit of community, a kind of a very strong horizontal experience. So you might not have a very high ceiling. You might have soft colors. You might have carpeting and all sorts of little touches, maybe tables as opposed to pews, to give you more of a sense of a kind of homeliness. Rabbi Soloveitchik, Rabbi Yosef Dov Soloveitchik from YU in Boston, of blessed memory, he suggested that the synagogue is different than the Beit HaMikdash. The Beit HaMikdash, we're entering God's home. In the synagogue, God enters our home, something like that. It's one of the reasons we don't walk barefoot. Why don't we walk barefoot in the synagogue? You had to walk barefoot in the Beit HaMikdash. Why don't you walk barefoot in the synagogue? Because the synagogue's not exactly the same thing. In our homes, we wear shoes. So too, in our synagogues, we wear shoes. So that would be, so somebody might say, that's how I want the synagogue to feel more like home. I want it to be Hamish. I want it to feel more like home. I want it to feel more comfortable. I want it to feel more horizontal. So you might have lower ceilings, you'll have carpeting and other kind of touches that would make it feel more like home. But you know, obviously we've entered synagogues that are quite the opposite, where they have very tall cathedral ceilings and people sit in pews, and the touches are more designed for awe than they are for Hamish. So when it comes to the Beis HaMikdash, it's about awe. It's supposed to evoke awe. When you step in there, you're supposed to feel awe, and you could imagine that there are design elements that would be appropriate for one and not appropriate for the other. So that's part of this, that it's not just that you're supposed to tell yourself, I'm in awe, I'm in awe, I'm in awe, but there are elements of the design and the service and the attitude maybe of the Kohanim that are meant to instill awe in the people that are visiting it. And okay, so well, and that this be fear from the fear of the temple, and that is his, God's, may be exalted, saying, and you shall fear my sanctuary. And the designation of this fear is like that which is mentioned in Sifra, which is again Midrash on Vayikra. Which is fear? One should not enter the Temple Mount with his staff, with his shoes, with his money belt, with the dust on his feet. He must not make a shortcut of it. And Kal v'chomer, he shouldn't spit in it, or A40, or he shouldn't spit in it. And it has already been explained that it is only permitted for kings of the house of David to sit in its courtyard. So no, but you are not allowed to sit. Kohanim could not sit. Kohanim are not allowed to sit. Nobody else who's in that courtyard can sit while you're in the courtyard. You have to stand. Only a king from the house of David can sit there. And you can't wear shoes. You can't walk with your money belt or your staff in there. You're supposed to wash off your feet. You're not supposed to make a shortcut. Now, these have been applied to, some of these have been applied to shul, like the shortcut. We say the proper etiquette when you're walking through shul is not to use it as a shortcut. So if you're, let's say you're on one side of the shul and you're going to go out through an exit where your car is parked, in order to go out through the exit, you're going to actually walk through the sanctuary part of the shul. So there are those who suggest you should pause for a moment. And there's a verse that some people say, Ashrei Yoshvei Beisecho Jalu Chasela. There's some people who say, happy are the ones who sit in your house. the first line from Ashrei. There's some people who say that, or just to pause and contemplate so that you're not using the sanctuary part as a shortcut. And they learn that from here. But clearly we do walk with shoes, as I pointed out from Rabbi Soloveitchik. We go there with our wallets. We don't not wear our wallets when we go in there. It's already been explained that, and we said that thing about the sitting in the courtyard. And this is from his, maybe Baltic saying, and shall fear my sanctuary. This is obligatory forever, even in our times, when it has been destroyed on account of the increase in our transgressions. So that means the Temple Mount has to be, you have to be in awe of the Temple Mount. And this is the language of the Sifra, Kedoshim, etc. This tells me only of the time when the temple existed. From where do we know that this is true even when the temple does not exist? Hence we may learn, my Sabbaths you shall keep and my sanctuary you shall fear. Just as the keeping of Shabbos is eternal, so too the fear of the temple is eternal. And there it is also said, it is not the temple that you fear, but he who makes his divine presence dwell in that place. So this suggests that there is some element of God's divine presence that remains at the site, even when the Beis HaMikdash has been destroyed. This is a matter of discussion in the Gemara about the sanctity of the area after the Beis HaMikdash has been destroyed. Certainly there is imagery in the prophets of God's divine presence leaving when the Beit HaMikdash is destroyed. But we are not supposed to believe that he's entirely left there. Certainly we still pray towards the Temple Mount with the, after the, which goes all the way back to the dedication of Shlomo, where Shlomo said, we're going to pray towards this area and you're going to listen towards this area. But there is a discussion about the sanctity of the first temple. Does that continue to exist? What about the sanctity of the second temple? What manner of sanctity exists? Is it forbidden to walk on top of the Temple Mount if you're impure, for instance? Let's say we are all impure because we've all at one point or another come in contact with a dead body. So that doesn't have to mean physically touch the dead body. It could even mean being in the same room as a dead body or being in a cemetery. So the assumption is we're all impure because of contact with the dead. If that's the case, are we allowed to walk up on the Temple Mount? There are those who suggest that you cannot walk on any of that area up there. There are others who suggest that there are some areas that are now available for walking that were not part of the original Temple Mount. And since that's the case, you can walk there. And they have a map. They have maps. I think Rabbi Goren came up with a map at one point of where you can walk and where you cannot. And this has been a flashpoint. There are Ben Gvir, the Knesset member, the kind of attention-getting member of the Knesset, just walked on the Temple Mount. But this has been going on for the last several months. There have been people up on the Temple Mount who were actually praying on the Temple Mount. This never used to happen, but now it started to happen. And there's been some shouting between different factions of religious people about whether this is appropriate. What are identified as the Haredi branches do not believe that you should be up there at all, even though every once in a while you'll see somebody who looks like a chassid up there. But so and there's even a sign that you're on that way where you could go up, like where tourists go up. There's a sign there that a person shouldn't go up there now. But again, there are quite a few Jews that are doing it, quite a few religious Jews that have been going up on there. And that's an issue. That's about purity and impurity. And the relationship between being up there when you're impure, where you can be and where you can't. This is about fear and awe, treating that space with fear and awe. So this
Rabbi?
is suggesting that even
Yeah.
separate from the whole purity and impurity, they're all these laws would still apply up there. Yeah.
Right. It was a little jarring when you said the king could sit for, because the king, I mean, it's still God's place, and the king is still a human being. And I don't know why, it just flashed, the king and I just flashed through where all the subjects couldn't, only the king could, they couldn't stand in the presence of the king. I don't know why, it just jarred me. So,
I think you're making a good point. My first thought is that ultimately the king is a symbol of God's kingship.
a symbol, but
He's not God. He's a symbol of God's kingship. So
right.
it could be that when he sits there, he is a kind of symbol of God's presence, maybe. He certainly has no role to play. And maybe that's also like some kind of gift to him, because he's completely out of his place when he's there. It's run by the Kohen Gadol. It's like a different executive branch. I don't know what the rules are if the president of the United States, when the president of the United States is in the House of Representatives, I know the vice president sits. Everybody can sit there at some point. Question is there some kind of etiquette that is unique to the president, or unique, like, does the Speaker of the House have some kind of special province in the House of
Yeah,
Representatives?
I'm not sure, but
Yeah,
that
that
would
would be
always
interesting
be
to see.
etiquette between human and human. You know what I mean? The divine right of kings seems a little, I don't know. It was
I hear you.
jarring to me.
I hear you. But maybe it's, I'm thinking there's a part of me that's thinking the symbol thing. There's another part of me that, although I get the iffy part of that, then there's the other part, which is that you've got the king he's in this other domain. And how are you going to demonstrate the awe for the king in a place where he's not the authority figure? Like, if you want to demonstrate he still has authority there. I don't know. Yeah, I hear
Oh, well,
you. I get
yeah.
it. Yeah. And then this last point, it's not the temple that you fear, but he who makes his divine presence dwell in that place. So ultimately, this is awe for God, not awe just for stones. Okay. Next mitzvah, another Beis HaMikdash related mitzvah. That is, he has commanded us to guard the temple, to constantly walk around it, to honor it, to exalt it, and to engradize it. And that is his saying to Aaron, while you and your sons under your charge are before the tent of testimony. And this command has already been repeated with different language, and that is his saying, and keep the charge of the tent of meeting. And is written in the Sifrei, while you and your sons under your charge are before the tent of testimony, the priests within and the Levites outside. And in the Mechilta, they said, these are again all halachic midrash, and keep the charge of the tent of meeting. This tells me only that it is with a positive commandment. From where do we know that it is also with a negative commandment? Hence, we learn to say, and you shall keep the charge of the sanctuary. Behold, it has been made clear to you that guarding the temple is a positive commandment. And there it is said, and it is an aggrandizement to the temple that it has guardians, and a place that has guardians is not the same as a place that does not have guardians. And it is well known that palace is a name for the temple chamber. They said that the aggrandizement and exaltation of the chamber is generated by the presence of the guards that are assigned to it, and the regulation of that commandment have already been explained in tractates Talmud and Midos. So what this means is there are supposed to be guards, kind of like beefeaters. These are an honor guard for the Mishkan and for the Beit HaMikdash. in the Beit HaMikdash, there were 24 posts that actually had guards, and most of them were Levim. In most of the, I think 21 of them were peopled by Levites, and 3 of them were peopled by Kohanim. And this is actually one of the responsibilities of Levites. There is a positive commandment for a Levi to guard the Beit HaMikdash. In fact, it may be the Rambam himself, although he doesn't say this, he doesn't express this here the same way he did the previous one, but there are many who hold that this mitzvah should still apply, that if the Rambam says the fear still applies, then shouldn't the guarding still apply? And that there actually could be a positive mitzvah fulfilled by a Levi if he stands guard near the Beit HaMikdash. And I think I saw advertisements for people that were trying to arrange such a thing so that Levim could fulfill this mitzvah. Again, they would be sort of like beef eaters. It shows, like nowadays, if somebody is followed by a lot of security, the sense that others get is they must be important. I've even heard of people that have done this sort of like it's a gag. They will hire people to follow them around as security and sort of pay attention to the response they get from the crowds around them. And tends to be, you can imagine that people assume that this person must be somebody important if they're being followed by security. So imagine a place that has security. It just gives you a sense of the importance of the event. Remember when we had Walid Shabbat at the North Shore Center for Performing Arts? And we had to have a police presence, including bomb sniffing dogs came through. And it just gave you this sense that something very serious is happening. If bomb sniffing dogs have to come through, there must be something very seriously happening. There's a story in a Tractate Tamid. It might even be in Yuma as well, but in Tractate Tamid, it talks about the various guards around, and they said that sometimes at night you'll hear somebody screaming, and they said it's probably a Levi who fell asleep on guard duty. Because what would happen is if there was a particular sergeant who'd go around to check to make sure that they were up, and if he found them asleep, he would light their robes on fire. They'd wake up to being on fire and scream, and you'd hear that shout afterwards. So anyway, so that is the mitzvah to guard the Beis HaMikdash. So far we've had the mitzvah to build the Beis HaMikdash, and the mitzvah to be in awe of the Beit HaMikdash, and the mitzvah to guard the Beit HaMikdash. And now we're on to mitzvah 23. And that is that only the Levites were commanded to serve in the temple in specific kinds of service, such as shutting the gates, reciting the songs of the time of sacrifice. So these are 2 of the primary mitzvahs that Levim do in the Beit HaMikdash. You're either a guard or you're part of the choir, or I guess more than the choir, but the choir and symphony. So either you're part of the choir and symphony or you're one of the guards. Those are the 2 primary mitzvahs of Levim. It used to be, but it's not, that was a temporary mitzvah. It used to be that they also would pack up the Mishkan, the tabernacle, and transport it. But that was limited to those times when you had a tabernacle. When you have a Beit HaMikdash, which is, we're not assuming we're going back to tabernacles, so when you have a Beit HaMikdash, that's how their responsibilities are played out in those 2 primary areas. And the Levites shall serve. And this is the language of the Sifri. I would understand that if he wishes, he serves, and if he doesn't wish, he does not serve. Hence we learn, and the Levites shall serve even against his will. This is an obligatory command and is placed upon him by force, and that is the service of the Levites. It's already been explained in several places in Tamid and Midos. Those are the tractates that deal with this. It's also explained in the chapter of Arachin, that only the Levites could recite song during the temple service. The command for this commandment is already repeated with different language, and that is his saying, and he shall serve in the name of the Lord his God like his fellow Levites. And they said in the second chapter of Arachin, what is the service that must be done in the name of the Lord? You must say that this is song. So there is song and guarding. So guarding had been discussed earlier. Now we're focused on song. And it says here that it's against, in other words, he has to serve. Now there is a period of time of service of God for Levites that is several decades long. So exactly how the details of this mitzvah. So for instance, let's say there's somebody who has a great voice, but he wants to be like a professional singer, but it's during the time of the Beis Hamikdash. It could be that they can tell him, no, you can't have your own separate career. You are going to be singing for the Beis Hamikdash, and that he won't be paid. You know, he said it's not going to get wealthy from it. You're going to get the tithes just like everybody else gets, and you're going to be singing the Beis Hamikdash. That's what it sounds like, and or be part of the choir or be one of the musicians. It seems like that's what he's saying from here, that you are drafted in. You must do that. Now, I guess there's a limit to how many people can be in a choir, and you may want to be in the choir, but the choir itself may decide that you don't belong there. And if that's the case, I'm assuming that you don't have to do it, because it can't make sense that you'd have to do something that the other people don't want you to be able to do. Okay, so tomorrow we are going to focus on Mitzvah 24. This is going to be about the Kohanim washing their hands. And so far we have been talking about Leviim. Now we're going to start talking about Kohanim, the priests. Also, I just want to make mention of the fact that starting this next week, I'm not going to be giving our class for several weeks. I'm sorry about this. I'm going to be away. This next week, I'm going away with my children and grandchildren. We're going to Wisconsin Dells. And the week after that, I'm going to Israel for 3 weeks. So we're not going to meet until, I'm coming back February 16th. So we're not going to meet till the first Monday after February 16th for this Rambam class. I am going to continue to give my Daf Yomi class, which is online. It's going to be 8 a.m. On the Zoom, if you're interested in that. And as far as other classes, there might be some other classes I'm going to try to give, but this one it's unlikely it's going to fit into my the schedules, I'm sorry to say. That Thursday women's class, I'm going to try to do that from Israel, but I don't think I'm going to be able to do it from Wisconsin Dells. All right, but we'll talk about that when we get to it. So this class, we're meeting this week, but then we're not going to meet for several weeks after that. I'm very grateful to learn with you guys. I look forward to doing it tomorrow as we continue in the Rambams. Sefer HaMitzvot.
Thank you, Rabbi. Till tomorrow.
Bye.
Rabbi, bye-bye.
Bye-bye, Stuart. Bye-bye.